So I have some poems from this book, Fortune, and then I'm going to read one poem from this, which has been requested. There's a little chapbook called Bestiary. They're mostly poems about animals. This is a poem I wrote when my youngest daughter got married. And she was married down in New Orleans. And we flew back to be there from the West Coast where we were living. And it was a kind of a clash of cultures. It's called American Wedding. The yarmulke hides the bald spot on my Goyish skull as I watch my new son-in-law's size 13 stomp down on the linen swathed wine glass. My daughter looks radiant, no other word for it, gowned in white satin, the color of light. We're surrounded by Jews dressed in black, like the sea, like the streets of Manhattan, whose young men will soon bear me up on a chair, a floating throne, over the circle, clapping and singing. I've eaten roast duck at the rehearsal dinner, listened to the cantor's plangent tones, stood by while the two signed the ornate ketubah, gold-leafed promise, unscrolled like a map of the world. My small, wan gaggle of distant family clumps together next to the aisle. Divorced, remarried, adopted, nervous. Our dead father's third wife coughing behind my stepchildren, ex-wife, half-brothers, motley, ragged, one nephew wearing a baseball cap. When the groom lifts the veil from her delicate temples, I'm thinking someone should warn them. A future of funerals, car payments, taxes, kids throwing up in the night. It's a job you mostly won't know how to do. Your naked arm deep in a jammed kitchen sink, burnt rinds of eggplant crazily adrift. Your children will lift their small faces toward you and give you reason to weep. And if you manage to stay together, there will be nights you lie down like strangers, back to back, falling away from each other in sleep. Above us, the moon looks speckled, torn, fluttering over the courtyard. And I'm dazed by the perfume rising up from this fleshy rose pinned to my worsted lapel. I'm swallowing down the thick nuptial wine, getting ready to dance all night. This is a poem called Lyrical. And as many of you probably know, you may know, in the poem you have a narrative. You can have a narrative which tells a story, or sometimes you have a lyrical element, which is a musical element. And that's where the poem kind of rises up into some form of song. It's good, of course.
Songs can be bad too.
Yeah, songs can be bad too. But we have a saying in the poetry world, which is music always wins.
Yeah.
So this was a poem that I wrote trying to write a lyrical poem, and that's the name of it, Lyrical. The spaniel next door yaps at the sparrows. He yaps at the crows and the mailman. He yaps at the compost pile and the sunflower, yaps at the rain and the sky. He yaps at the steps leading down to the creek where the flax plants bloom high as my waist, and blue flowers force their way up through small stones the color of night. He yaps at the garbage truck's backup beeper, iron bell, song of the priest and bridegroom, song of the lone ship, song of the train, song of the big waves rolling and breaking over the western reefs. He yaps at the rose bush, yaps at the fence, song of the sidewalk cracked in half, the wine bottle resting against the curb, the neighbor who doesn't come home. Maybe I'll read you guys Urban Coyote from his fine chapbook bestiary. I had a request for this one. And I got this idea from reading about how around the city of Chicago and a lot of other cities, coyotes are starting to come down into the environs of town. So this is an urban coyote. In the green dream of spring, I stretch myself out, letting the gray mist hide me, shoving my nose in the garbage pile, chewing eggshells and cheese rinds. I swallow cellophane, I swallow cat hair, butcher paper stained brown with fish blood, and run grinning through the blousy woods, smelling the riverbank's plasma. I smell the barns in the city dump, the quail asleep in the tall grass. In the morning, the doctors send over my lab results, triglycerides and cholesterol, glucose and prostate antigen, diets of cold fruit, nuts and water. I sign the mortgage papers. I read the bank statement. I pay the gas bill. I sweep the floor. Then, in the marshy, glycemic night, I lick back the plush fur covering my lips. I steal whatever can fit in my mouth under the fat April moon. This is a poem from that same book called Sentimental. I don't know how many of you know the poetry of James Wright, but he's a fine American poet. And so this partly refers to him. I refer to him in here along with some other poets of years going by, and as well as the writer Leo Tolstoy. This poem's called Sentimental. I'm writing this down with a pen from Rite Aid, which no one gave me and I did not steal. My hand curved over itself like the claw of a possum following the late November light into the woods where Tolstoy was buried. Me and James Wright sit down by a red pine, watching a wiry dog chase the crows and hoping the rain will hold off. We speak of the smell of certain saloons, the bar lit gold by glasses of beer, the dartboard and shuffleboard, the mirrors and coats and the women's dark hair. We talk of the high school field's cut grass, the tough skin of the tackling dummy, stopping every so often to take a swallow of water and lime, the fresh landscape of a woman's back, the Ohio River sucking its banks. We talk of Lee Poe and Vallejo, of telling the critics to stick the shield of irony up their ass, and the three policemen who appeared at Tolstoy's funeral, whom the crowd forced to show respect for the dead, who took off their hats and knelt down in the leaves. It's supposed to be a true story.